I understand Denver's gripe over everybody talking about the Lakers. And I would even understand if the Heat are like, look, dude, we've been in the NBA Finals. We get the Heat culture thing. We've won championships. We were the 1 seed last year. But can we be honest? The teams down 3-0 are more the story. And why is it? They were both favored, and they have a combined, 34 NBA championships? So we have to be realistic and fair. I get, if you want to get your feelings in the, why are you talking about the Nuggets? Because nobody watches the Nuggets play. They just don't. For whatever reason, Mountain Time Zone is the forgotten time zone. I mean, I'm sure the fewest people in the country live in the Mountain Time Zone. Maybe that's a good portion of it, right? And Phoenix is only in the Mountain Time Zone part of the time, so you'll lose that in terms of Mountain Time Zone, because they don't do the daylight savings time. Like, we're just not doing it. We're not doing it. We're Phoenix. But the story is the other teams. Because the Celtics, it felt like they quit. Didn't it? Then you got the whole thing with Joe Mazzulla, where a couple nights ago, he said, like, we were prepared. They just outplayed us in one quarter. Last night, he said this.
I just didn't have them ready to play. I just didn't have execute the proper game plan. I didn't put them in the right mentality to be ready. And, it's my job to make sure that they're connected and that they're ready to play, and I didn't do that.
So getting your team ready to play, playing at that magic level, and he's right. In game 2, it wasn't that they weren't ready to play. It's that coming out at halftime, they got mollywomped, and so whatever was in the orange wedges at halftime worked out for the Heat. I also think there's a little of Sean McVay to it, where saying it's the players, saying it's himself, not the players, never laying blame on the players. But behind the scenes, I'm guessing that the finger pointing is different. Did you see this from Magic Johnson? Now, part of it is Magic Johnson usually has the most obvious tweets ever. Obvious tweets ever. Like, Magic Johnson, if he was tweeting about the Doug Gottlieb show right now, would say, it's May 22nd at 12:05, and Doug Gottlieb is likely talking about the NBA playoffs because that's what he does, right? That's a Magic Johnson sort of tweet. They're just basic and obvious and kind of lame. And especially when you try and convince somebody, it's like, look, I don't think – yesterday I was coaching a basketball game, and an official came up to me. He's like, I would have thought you were a much bigger jerk based upon Twitter. I was like, I don't think I've been a jerk. I didn't say a word to you the whole game. It's like, oh, I know. It's just like, you read somebody's Twitter account. If you try and tell a 25-year-old that Magic Johnson was once not only the best player in the NBA, one of the greatest players ever, but one of the most dynamic personalities in the NBA, and they follow him on Twitter, like, no way. So Magic Johnson said this on Twitter, I think earlier today. In my 44 years of being associated with the NBA, I never thought I'd see a Boston Celtics team, a franchise with 17 championships, quit. I know the Celtics fans all over the world must be disgusted and devastated. The Miami Heat blew them out 128-102 in Game 3. Now, the thing he didn't need the score and the game. We all have phones, Magic, we're aware. But the point is that Magic very rarely seems critical. And I understand it's the Celtics and, old habits die hard. You want to kind of dance on the grave of the Celtics. But when it's that obvious, when Captain Obvious tweets something obvious that your team quit, now you have a problem. Anyone can lose. You lose. You miss shots you should make. You make it. There's a call here, a play there, or somebody's sick. You turn an ankle. You can lose the game. But when Magic Johnson, yes, he's obvious with his tweets, but when Captain Obvious says, hey, it's obvious that you quit, that's an issue. I mean, take a listen. This is Charles Barkley. He's talking with Gabe Vincent of UC Santa Barbara, right? Go Gauchos. Here's Charles Barkley after the game.
Closeout game, in my little experience in the playoffs, has always been the most difficult. So regardless, whether we're at home or on the road, it's going to be a battle. They're a really good team. They're a well-coached team. They got stars. They're not going to lay down. So, we got to come in and handle business on Tuesday.
Yeah, clearly you didn't watch the game tonight. Talk about well-coached and don't lay down. Go look at the tape again.
Here's Eddie House, who, of course, joins us sometimes in the show. He works for NBC Sports Boston.
I feel like the Celtics have quit on their coach. Let's call it what we really see. I feel that those guys out there don't believe in what their coach is doing. We've seen that done in many other places. I don't believe that they really believe in Joe Mazzulla. I just feel that, because if you believe in whoever is out there, the leader of your team, whether it be a coach, that message is passed down through the superstars. Lackluster efforts, not getting out in transition, not getting back in transition defense. To me, it looks like a team that's already defeated. So, I hate to say like this, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if we go in and lay another egg, because we've been laying them, this whole series.
Here's Jason Tatum had an exchange about the fans thinking they quit on this in the game.
We just gotta be connected more. I think, I deleted Twitter from my phone to start the playoffs. So honestly, I haven't seen anything good, bad, or indifferent. I'm certain after every game you win, you're the best player and the best team, and when you lose, you're not the star and team's not good enough. So I'm certain there'll be some of that. But, out of sight, out of mind, because that's not what's important. What's important is, the guys in the locker room, teammates, coaches, and, we all in this together just trying to figure it out.
I'll say this about Mazzulla. So I know Joe a little bit, and everyone I know who knows him thinks he's awesome. But you can be awesome and not be the right fit for the right team at the right time. And something else to keep in mind. There was at least some level of internal push from some to have Damon Stoudemire be the coach when Ime was at first suspended and then ultimately fired, and Mazzulla was named the interim head coach. So Damon was still on the staff, but he left in March to become the head coach at Georgia Tech. So look at that staff now. Aaron Miles is a young guy. Obviously played at Kansas, played a little in the NBA. He was a skill development guy with the Golden State Warriors, and now he's front of the bench. They don't have – you lose Ime last year, who was a grinder, made it to playing in the league, and he had Damon on the bench, in front of the bench. Like, you go from two former players to a lot of guys that didn't play in the NBA, regardless of how smart, competent, good you are. There's just – it does feel like, and I think this is one reason that Brad kicked himself upstairs, was Brad wasn't jibing or, and I think Brad's really good, and most guys really like him, really relate to him. Tatum and Brown, not so much. And if you remember, Tatum and Brown, they weren't in college when Brad was at Butler. Maybe when they were, growing up, obviously. But there's not necessarily as much sweat equity with younger guys, even though, of course, Brad took them to a conference finals. This team has tuned out their coach. And I actually think it's worse than we could have imagined because of what Joe Mazzulla said. You're like, what are you talking about? Joe Mazzulla took all the blame, put none of it on the players, which likely means behind the scenes, it's a player problem. And now the players are talking about connectivity. That's a communication problem. That's cohesion. That's a coach problem. Coach and player problem. They're a mess. An absolute mess. I just learned that Discover Credit Cards does something pretty awesome. At the end of your first year, they automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right. Everything you've earned doubled. Cash back on trips, restaurants, all doubled. Seriously, though, see terms. Check it out for yourself at discover.com/match. Coming from the Doug Gottlieb Show live from the Tire Rack. What are you going to say? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
I wanted to clarify something with the time zones. So Arizona is always on Mountain Standard Time. What ends up happening is us in the Pacific time zone, we switch from Pacific Standard Time to Pacific Daylight Time. And Pacific Daylight and Mountain Standard are the same time. It's just Arizona does not ever change. So they are never on Daylight Time. They are always on Mountain Time, but it's just always Mountain Standard Time.
That was confusing.
I thought I clarified it pretty well.
No, you clarified. I had no idea that Pacific Standard and Pacific Daylight Time, it actually changed that second letter. I didn't even know.
Yeah, so PDT is Pacific Daylight, just like EDT, and then there's EST. And it is top 10 of my pet peeves. It may be 8th or 9th, but when people use the EST or the EDT wrong in Standard or Daylight Time. Right now, because we've changed our clocks, we are in Daylight, just like the East Coast is in Eastern Daylight, so EDT is good to use. But in the winter, EST is what we would use, and we would use PST out here. In Arizona, they just always use MST because they are always Mountain Standard Time.
I just learned something new. I was today years old when I learned about the D instead of the S and what it actually meant. Jay Stu, did you know that?
I knew a version of that. In other words, I wouldn't be able to articulate it as good as Dan, but I'm aware of what he's talking about. Yep.
Ramos, did you have any idea?
That's affirmative.
You did?
Yes. Yeah, I knew that because my family lives in Colorado. My mom's family. So what do you mean? Here we go.
Wait, did you know that?
I mean, I couldn't explain it as well as Dan.
This is what I'm asking. Did you guys know that it actually changed from PST to PDT?
Yes.
Yes.
You did?
Yep.
I had no idea.
Most people let that go. Like if you're in business and you put PST down, it takes a real jerk to be like, you mean PDT? Like,
it does.
It's the same freaking thing.
I try to hold back from it.
You have Jay Stu, do you have any pet peeves that people say or do? I have an easy one. I hate when people say we was. And here's another one. There's a couple other ones. When they say that's a tough road to hoe, you cannot hoe a road. I mean, maybe you can if you have superhuman strength. You hoe a row. You hoe a row. Oh, here's another one. This is one, Buyer, maybe you can get into. What was it? Oh gosh, golly! Now I'm blanking. I talked about
this huge pet peeve when people forget.
No,
what they're about to say.
When people forget their pet peeves, that's a pet peeve. Very good one. When they say, "I could care less."
Ah, yes.
It's I couldn't care less. Whatever the smallest amount of caring is, there is no less there that I could. That's I do not, because I couldn't care less is I do not care. If you say I could care less, that's saying I care.
You should follow up. Well, how much could you care less then, if you could?